Hello and welcome back to Beckler Guitars and Repairs. We've got a busy week this week, lots to do, so just going to do a quick pan so you can see what we got. So, there's a ton of guitars in here. So some of these are repairs, some of these are going to be reviews, some other cool stuff. This is pretty neat. So yeah, we got a bunch to cover this week, so let's get started. Okay, so this is what we're going to be starting off with this week. So I picked this up locally for a good price. Ooh. Pretty nice looking. Alright, so this is a 2014 Eastman AR805CE. So this is one of their arch tops, fully hollow body models. If you're not familiar with Eastman, they're made in China, but in a handmade facility. So kind of like a small handmade builder shop, but in China, and they're quickly growing a very stellar reputation of outstanding instruments made out of you know, really quality parts and great attention to detail and craftsmanship. This one's pretty gorgeous. This one's got an ebony fretboard. It's got the Gibson style truss rod, and it's even got an ebony pick guard, an ebony tailpiece, solid spruce top. I believe it's spruce, I'll have to double check that. And the specs. And then on the back you've just got this wild flame maple. And that continues on to the sides as well. And then you've got this mini, it looks like a mini humbucker pickup. So you can plug it in. And the controls are actually hidden underneath the pickguard here. So you've got a volume and a tone control. So today we're just going to go over it, make sure everything's good on it, and get it all set up to sell. This is going to be a reverb listing. And there's the truss cover, which appears to be ebony as well. So I thought that was actually missing, so I'm glad that was in there. Okay, let's get on the bench and have a look. Okay, so here it is in the bench. So I just want to go over a few things I saw when I picked it up, and things that we're going to need to address. So it's overall in pretty good condition. There's a couple things that I noticed. So there's some finish checking throughout. If you can see here, if I get really close, you can see those lines there. So that's an example of some finish checking. These are in nitro finish, so much like a Gibson. So they do check very similarly. And the frets are in good condition. There's no sign of wear, but I did notice that there are some high spots. So there is some buzzing that will need to be fixed. For example, if I on the E string, okay. There was buzzing when I tried it last. Alright, well, the buzzing's not as bad as I thought it was. We're still going to go over it with a fret rocker and see if we can get it better than it is. Another thing I noticed was, if you look carefully on the pick guard, the binding is separating, because this guitar is so fancy. It has a bound pick guard that's made of real wood, which is kind of crazy. But there's a little bit of a gap between the binding and the ebony right there. So what I want to do is put a little bit of wood glue in there and clamp it just to make sure everything's as it should be. Oh yeah, you can actually pull it apart right there. So not too hard to fix, just a little bit of adhesive and we should be good. Yeah, a little bit more checking on the heel. You see here, although it's yeah, it just feels like it's finished checking. It's not structural. And overall, quite good shape. Not a lot of scratches or dings anywhere. There's a little bit more finish checking right on the seam of the fretboard here, where the binding is. You see that happen on Gibsons a lot too. The wood shrinks a little bit and then it checks right across. But overall, not bad. Let's go ahead and take some specs of this thing. Okay, well, it weighs in at 5 pounds, 4.9 ounces, so very light. Alright, here's the neck profile. So it looks like a nice kind of rounded C. It stays pretty rounded throughout. So yeah, there's a look at the profile straight on. So yeah, nice rounded C. The neck itself, it feels somewhat chunky. I would say right in the middle. Between, it feels like kind of like a Gibson 60s neck, not quite a 50s in terms of chunkiness. So it's a nice neck profile. All right, here's a look at our truss rod, which is nice. There's no thread showing, so there's lots of room for adjustability. And our fretboard looks nice and dark, very nice looking ebony. So our width at the first fret is 1.75, so it's a little wider than normal, and 2.06 at the 12th. And first fret neck depth of 0.86, and 12th fret, actually let's do 11 because it's turning into the heel there, 0.898. Got our multimeter on the pickup. It looks like we're getting a reading of 7.68. I was just checking out some of the specs on the website because I'm kind of unfamiliar with Eastman guitars, and so yeah, this is confirmed ebony tailpiece, ebony pickguard, ebony floating bridge, ebony fretboard, solid spruce top. The flame maple back and sides is solid, so this is not a veneer, this is solid maple for the back and sides. The neck is maple as well. It's got a 12-inch fingerboard radius. It's got a 24.75 scale length, so a lot like a Gibson. And it's got that multi-ply binding, which is like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 ply binding around the whole thing. And the fretboard is bound as well as the headstock. And yeah, overall just a really beautiful guitar. We're just going to check the setup now and see what it needs, if anything. So yeah, there's quite a bit of relief in the neck. probably more than I usually like. It's an acoustic, more of an instrument though, so you don't want it to be quite as flat as like an electric. You want it to have a little bit more relief, but I'm just gonna tighten the truss rod a little bit to see if I can close that up a bit. Okay, let's check the relief. So yeah, that one, it's a very responsive truss rod. 2 little turns and it immediately got rid of some of that action. And I want to set it up so right about where I like to play it to see what kind of fret level it's going to need. So my action's set right. Now I'm just going to check the frets quick with a pick to make sure that there's no buzz. Wow, okay, so when I tried this at the person I was buying at house, it was really buzzy. It was buzzing everywhere. I had to adjust the bridge a little bit to even get it playable, but there was still a lot of buzz. When I tried it out today, the buzz was virtually gone. What I think might have happened is that little truss adjustment, along with the humidity in my shop. I think he might have been storing this in a very dry location, and it's been in my shop for quite a few days with the humidifier going. So I like to keep it in between, you know, 30 and 35% humidity in my shop, which is great for acoustic type instruments. And even that humidity might have made the wood adjust like in the neck and got rid of that buzz. So that's great. It's I was all set to do a fret level on it, but it looks like it's not needed. It's playing great. All right, I'm going to take off the strings so we can look at the pickup and the pick guard and just see how it's constructed along with the floating bridge. And then we'll use the endoscope to have a look on the inside. Okay, here we are with the strings off. Just gonna have a look at the bridge. I adjusted a little bit to compensate for the action that I wanted, but yeah, it's a nice bridge made of full ebony. It looks to be of good quality. And then I'm just gonna leave in the dust so I know exactly where to put the bridge back when I restring it again. But typically the bridge on an arch top is set, you can tell right where the points of the F-hole are. So right between there is typically where you set your bridge for perfect intonation. They kind of build it that way. So it takes the guesswork out of intonating it, but we will intonate it once we put it back together and make sure that's the case. So our pickup actually is right in the tailpiece, and that feeds a wire through the body up through the F-hole, which is hidden there. Let's see if I can get a good angle. And then that runs to the controls that are hidden underneath the pickguard. So it's kind of a clever way of doing it. And then this pickup is not actually mounted to the body. It's floating and it's attached to the pickguard. So to remove the whole assembly, all you have to do is remove these 2 screws hidden underneath the pickguard, and then you can remove the whole thing. So let's go ahead and do that just to see. Alright, so we have the pickguard removed, and let's have a quick look here. So yeah, there's the pickguard mounted to the pickup mounted to the pickguard, and then we have our controls down here. So just a volume and a tone. And this pickup is a Kent Armstrong HJGS6GD. So that's kind of like a mini humbucker, it looks like. So pretty cool. Again, if you ever wanted to remove this pickguard and this pickup, there would be no marks on the body at all. You could just use it acoustically, except for those 2 screw holes where it mounts. So that's kind of neat, kind of a smart way of doing it. So now I'm just going to put it back on. Actually, I'm going to leave it off while we figure out this binding issue on the pickguard. So 1 sec. Alright, so what I've done is I've used my favorite wood glue, which is my Tight Bond 1 original. And I've just put a small bead of glue on top of the pickguard, and what I'm going to do is use a putty knife to force it in between the binding and the pickguard. And then I'm going to clean everything up and clamp it with a clamp, and that should be all that's needed. So I'm just going to go ahead and use my putty knife to force the glue in between. So perfect. And then just this area here. And then I'm just going to use a rag to clean everything up to make sure that there's not a lot of cleanup when this is done. Alright, here it is all clamped up. So I just used some basic clamps. This spot was really hard to get a clamp on, so I squeezed it tight and then taped it shut with like some blue painter's tape, and that seemed to be enough tension to keep it closed. So yeah, relatively easy repair for that. And now we just have to wait till it dries and we can continue working on the guitar. While we wait for the pickguard to dry, I'm going to use a fret rocker just to see if there's any trouble areas for the frets. It seemed really good when I was trying it, so let's just see if there's any other spots that could use a fret level. Nice and level. There's going to be no fret level needed. The ends are a bit sharp, so I'm going to go ahead and dress the ends, and I'll show you how to do that. So I like to put some tape down just to make sure I'm not hitting anything I shouldn't be with the file. And then I'm going to use, there's a couple different tools you can use. I like to just use my fret filing tool, which is the bastard file that I use to level the frets. But you can also get this kind of a fret file. So this is specifically made for doing fret ends. So you place the file against the fretboard on the end as so, and then you go back and forth until they're nice and flush. What I find though is sometimes the file is sticking out a little too much, so you can sometimes file the binding a little bit if you're not careful. And then this angle is to do more of like the 90-degree part of the fret to make that nice and smooth. So this is a good tool, but I just don't really trust it in high-end guitars in case I slip. So I find I have a little bit better results with just my standard file as long as I'm careful. So I'm going to go ahead and just do that very carefully. So you're going to be able to feel right away when there's a fret that needs filing. You'll be able to feel that pressure of the file grinding on something. So yeah, this one's very minor. It just needs a little something. And then once it's filed, the frets are going to feel nice and smooth with the file, and that means there's nothing unlevel sticking out. So already that's pretty much addressed the problem. Yeah, that all feels good. Now I'm gonna do the other side. Typically I flip the guitar upside down to do this, but because we have our pick guard there, I'm just gonna do it this way. This side has a little bit more trouble spots, but overall, not too bad. All right, let's go ahead and feel that. So yeah, there we go. Nice and smooth. Nothing catching. And then I just like to go over that with a little bit of a sandpaper and some micro mesh just to make sure it's nice and smooth. So actually this is already pretty smooth, so I think I'm just gonna skip right to the micro mesh. If you skip the sandpaper and these are really sharp, you're gonna just tear up your micro mesh. But yeah, this is already ready for micro mesh. It's nice and smooth. And yeah, I just put this cloth underneath the pickguard so I didn't scratch anything while it's waiting. Okay, yeah, very nice and smooth now, buttery smooth, no issues. So that's how I typically deal with sharp front ends, and it's a pretty quick process to fix. So tight bond usually takes about 10 minutes to set, so if we remove the pick guard or remove the clamps, they should be good to go. I'm just gonna give it another 10 minutes to be safe here. Okay, here we have the endoscope, and we're gonna have a look on the inside. Okay, here we are inside, just having a quick look to see at the overall construction. So there's our heel block, and you can see inside that the back is absolutely one piece of flame maple. You can see the flame, and everything looks really clean on the inside. Sometimes if you look in an ES335, you can see glue squeeze out everywhere and it just looks kind of rough. This is really clean, and you can see the top is braced like an acoustic guitar, and you can see the purfling all the way around that connects the top to the sides and the sides to the bottom. And there we can see our F holes and our where the output jack feeds into. And there's our heel joint at the top there. And you can see the grain of the spruce top as well. And there's another view of our heel block. So yeah, overall very, very clean on the inside. It looks like there was a lot of attention to detail. It looks great. Okay, so upon further inspection, there was a little bit of a gap in a few spots in the binding and the ebony fretboard. So I did basically the same thing I did to the pickguard to the neck. Now it looks a little bit more dramatic than it is. I just had to use a lot of clamps to make sure there was even clamping pressure. Otherwise a new spot could open up. So I'm just gonna let this clamp for about an hour, and then I'll come back and we can restring it and play it and see how it sounds and plug it in. Okay, clamps are off, and it looks like the few little spots I was worried about closed up nicely. So, and the frets look really good. They look like there's hardly any signs of wear, so I'm not sure this guitar was played very much. But yeah, the frets look good. I just wanted to quickly show how the pickguard turned out as well. So everything closed up nicely. So everything's looking good there. And yeah, we're about ready to give it a restring and plug it in, see how it sounds. Alright, I'm going to be using some D'Addario Jazz lights on this guitar, the EJ21s. Just about perfect for this. And these strings have the wound G string as well, which a lot of jazz players appreciate. We're all strung up here. I'm going to go ahead and tune it with the Peterson tuner. Up, all intonated, and all the frets are checked to make sure there's no buzz. So it's playing quite nicely now. Check the setup and I'll show you. So if we use the 3rd fret, we can see the strings almost resting nicely on the 1st fret. That means the action here is good. I'm just going to check the relief in the neck with my notch straight edge. It's about perfect, right where I want it to be. Yep. And the action at the 12th fret, you can see here. We can just check it. So at the 12th fret, it's looking at about 1.5 to 2. And on the high E, we're looking at about 1 to 1.5. So this is a little bit of a thicker gauge of strings, kind of like an acoustic. So that's perfectly low for what we need it to be. And I'm just going to play it a bit acoustically. So it sounds quite nice acoustically as well. And these are nickel strings, so these are meant for a electric guitar. Well, it's all set up and ready to go. Let's go ahead. So this guitar needed a little bit of work. What it all boiled down to is I think someone let this guitar dry out. So that would explain our sharp frets. That would explain some of the binding gaps. And that would explain the fret buzz until it's kind of rehydrated and I adjust the truss rod a little bit. That would also explain the finish cracks. So what happens is when the wood starts to dry, it shrinks and it leads to all these problems. So it shrinks, so it leads to gaps in the binding. It shrinks, so it leads to sharp frets. The frets are sticking out a little bit more as the wood shrinks. The top of the guitar shrinks because this is solid wood, and the finish has to contract with it, which leads to some checking. And these are solid top and solid back and side guitars. A lot of people treat these fully hollow body guitars a lot like electric. On electric guitars, you don't have to be as worried about the humidity, but these ones you have to treat them almost like an acoustic guitar because they're very similar, and otherwise you're going to get these problems. So once I introduced it to this 30% humidity environment, the neck adjusted properly, and we fixed the small gaps that were showing. So now it's good, except for the a little bit of finish checking, but that's pretty standard on most of these types of guitars. But thankfully it didn't dry out to the point where we were getting big splits in the wood or anything else like that. So if you own one of these types of guitars, make sure you keep it at humidity. Otherwise it's going to lead to problems. Just like an acoustic guitar, you should be treating these the same as a high-end acoustic. Okay, we're plugging in the Eastman AR805CE. See how it sounds with the pickup, the Kent pickup on here. So I'm just running into the 65 Deluxe Reverb, just using the reverb on the amp. We're also using the PS1 Power Soak Bugera attenuator. So this is just to get an idea of the tone. It's got a tone control knob here and a volume. So I'm just maxing out everything. I'm just gonna play some jazzy type stuff, just so we can hear. About halfway. And now I'm just going to roll the tone right off. next thing I want to try is just a little bit of distortion on this thing. So I've turned on the pedals, that's why there's a little bit of electronic whine. But I just want to see what it sounds with a little bit of dirt. So it sounds pretty good with a little bit of distortion too, really bluesy. Alright, so what are my final thoughts on the Eastman AR805CE? So yeah, this definitely feels and plays like a fine, like handcrafted instrument. It's got beautiful materials and appointments like the ebony pickguard and the ebony tailpiece, the ebony fretboard, along with the ebony truss cover, solid spruce top along with the flamed full back and sides. So yeah, it's a pretty amazing guitar. I'm typically not much of a jazz player myself, but I can definitely appreciate this instrument and what it's going for. The pickup sounds great for jazzy type stuff, but you can even get some nice blues tones out of it as well. We had to do a little bit of work on this guitar. Someone had let it dry out, so there were some issues. The binding was separating from the pickguard that we had to glue and clamp and fix. There was a few small binding spots on the fretboard where they were separating a little bit, so that had to be rectified as well. And it needed a bit of a truss adjustment and a setup, because when we got it, it was buzzing all over the place, and now it plays great. So yeah, I would say the quality is definitely on par with like a Gibson or higher, maybe even like a... It seems to remind me a lot of a Heritage. I played kind of a similar jazz box Heritage before, and it really reminded me of that. It sounds great acoustically, and the pickup is really nice too, plugged in. So yeah, this would be great for a jazz player, or even you know, someone who kind of prefers acoustic. You could use this because it sounds great acoustically, and the strings are just a little bit easier on your fingers rather than acoustic strings. You could plug it into an acoustic amp, it would sound great too, because the pickup's really mellow. So overall, this is just a really nice example of guitar, and yeah, Eastmans are great. If you can find one for a reasonable price, I would definitely recommend. And just another reminder that you have to treat these solid top instruments, fully hollow body, much like an acoustic, because if they dry out, it's going to have all the same problems as an acoustic. Luckily this one didn't dry out to the point where there was some major damage like cracking or big cracks in the fingerboard or anything else like that. So but you definitely want to keep these humidified with a humidifier in the case or in a humidified room. And this example, the only damage it has now, there are just a couple spots where there's finish checking, and everything else has been addressed. Like we did a fret level, or sorry, a fret dress to address the sharp frets, so those are nice now, and it plays and sounds great. And if you're interested in this guitar, it will be available on my Reverb, and I'll put the link in the description. Alright, so that's going to be it for today. Thank you for tuning in to Beckler Guitars and Repair, and we'll see you next time. We got a lot to cover this week, so stay tuned.